Poem, The Promise. Stay, I said to the cut flowers, the spider, my body, the leaf. Stay, I said to the earth. And in this poem, they all responded with, no. Stay, I said to my loves. Each answered, always. So I'm going to start and end with this promise. Life's gift to you, your loves, will stay always in one form or another. Maybe not recognizable to you, but endure they will in the relationships that follow, in your children, in institutions, in your unique words echoing long after you're gone. Your loves will stay. In return, I ask you about your gift to life. Carefully choose what you love, for it will be what you worship. Regardless if you worship for good or ill, you will change the world. This month, our topic for Soul Matters, our small group ministry, and for Sunday services is evolution. Now, as I've told some of you before, I'm a biologist, and this biologist gets all excited about the topic, but I don't think that you came here for a lecture on biology. Or did you? I'm suspicious. At the heart of evolution, whether you are thinking of evolution of a species, thought, theology, or church community, is about adaptation. Simply put, the survivors are those people, communities, or species that are best able to adapt. Those that survive are not necessarily the strongest or the loudest or the most passionate. They are those that are adaptive to the current circumstance. A misconception about evolution is the concept that there is a doneness or end point to evolution, that somehow there's a goal to be reached and then all will remain as is. In reality, evolution is simply about adapting to this place and time. And it is always messy and rarely linear. It is always messy, which is irritating. And never linear, which is also irritating. Most certainly, what was adaptive in the past will not likely work now, nor will what works now necessarily do so in the future. So it would behoove us to accept that the way things are will change. It has always been and will always be so. All this being said, we are a product of the past. Whether we are aware of it or not, it is the substrate from which we emerge. It is the loves of those past. It is the clay with which we have to sculpt our present. We are always shaping this faith, this finding of meaning, and I hope we always do, to fit the times, to fit our understanding of the best way to be together and in the world. But having some understanding of our foremothers and fathers might offer us the insight needed to be both nimble and patient, and dare I say, to have faith as a religious community. Emerson, in our first reading, reminded us that what we worship matters, and even if we keep it a secret, it will out. I am the daughter of religious runaways. As a young woman, my mother strayed from the evangelical faith of her family, and perhaps the word strayed is too passive. She ran away from that faith, choosing to marry another faith escaper, my father. He was the son of a Baptist minister here in Des Moines. So you see, I'm here because they rejected their religions. That little bit of history, that evolution, is working well for me. I think of my parents in this story when I hear Jen's song, Faith in Me, which, by the way, she has CDs. And I imagine this young couple would relate to the lyrics. Is this really where I want to be? No, I don't think so. When I was a young child, my family lived near Minneapolis, but my mother's family still lived on the farm my great-great-great-grandparents had homesteaded near Ankeny, Iowa. Once or twice a year, we would drive down to visit our relatives. Now, as you might imagine, there was some tension in these family relations. Let me illustrate this by describing one such visit. When I was 4 or 5, my great aunt saved me, not from drowning or choking or some other such disaster. She saved my soul. I was left in her care to take a nap while my mother was visiting or shopping. And I remember the chenille bedspread, so vintage now. I remember my great-grandmother's bread and butter pickles. We didn't have those at home. And aprons. The memory is very tactile to me. All this was a very happy memory until the strange request that I take Jesus into my heart. And so, I stand before you, a jewel in the crown of my great aunt. Counted among her souls saved. My mom was angry. She tells me now that it wasn't about being saved, it was about my great aunt getting credit in church for counting my soul as one jewel in her crown. It was accumulating status. It's tempting to reject religion, isn't it? When we encounter these kinds of experiences. My great aunt worshiped prestige in her church. Recognition of her righteousness, so much so that she crossed a boundary and risked her relationship with her niece. Her worship outed her, and my mother knew it. My aunt is long gone, but what she worshiped is still with me, isn't it? And now it's with you. In spite of all this, certainly not because of it, these runaway parents produced a child that frankly came to crave community and the spiritual expression of a church. Worship is about shaping that which is of worth. What is of worth to you? What is of worth here in this congregation? What do we worship? Counting souls saved? Probably not. What do we as Unitarian Universalists worship? We have our weaknesses, trust me. Among them, might I count the worship of individualism? We so admire Emerson. His words are awesome. Oh, if I could write like that. He walked away from his pulpit as a Unitarian minister to pursue transcendentalism. And yet we now enthusiastically claim him as our own, a Unitarian hero to be sure. He wrote in his journals, "I have sometimes thought that in order to be a good minister, it is necessary to leave the ministry. The profession is antiquated. In an altered age, we worship in the dead forms of our forefathers." This was over 100 years ago. Furthermore, he felt that to be self-reliant meant that one has self-mastery. He wrote little of community or the understanding that not all are born into circumstances or of a color or gender that would allow him or herself this luxury of self-actualization. Can I offer that Emerson's vision may need to be adapted for our times? For our wider understanding of privilege. Adaptation doesn't mean throwing out the old, just putting on new understandings. Another of our UU weaknesses, I argue, is our passion for religious freedom. One of the prevailing myths is that the founding mothers and fathers sought religious freedom. Is that still what we're seeking? This original freedom was to express a liberal Christian faith. And yet, here we are, still with the name of Unitarian, that is, one God, no Trinity, and Universalist, universal salvation, no damnation, from those original Christians. What would they have thought back in 1825 when the American Unitarian Association, later to become the Unitarian Universalist Association, first formed? Imagine their astonishment and perhaps dismay if they could be where I am standing now. Freedom looks different. I see atheists, agnostics, pagans, humanists, and theists, all here together this morning. Some of us are questioning our beliefs. Others are trying something on for now to see if it's a good fit. Some of us are quite tolerant of our differences, while others struggle to be inclusive. And yet today, you showed up. What would we be astonished by should we stand here in 100 years? Individualism and freedom. Be careful with these, with what you mean by these. Do we worship them? Are they positively adaptive? Does my freedom, my individualism, my opinion mean that you are not free or welcome to your unique identity? Do we fail to invite others to the table because we demand that our own voices be heard? Let me be the first to admit that I struggle. I was first made aware of this when I was engaged in a career assessment. This should just be like deep psychological profile. I don't know why they call it a career assessment. It sounds like they're going to see if you know how to type. Keyboard. So I go to Chicago and I go for this career assessment, and I've done the MMPI and the Myers-Briggs and all that, and I'm. And so everything was familiar. My Myers-Briggs test seemed fine and not surprising. But then there was this analysis of your spiritual type. And you could Google this because it's kind of fun if you like little surveys to see who you are. I took the long version. So there's 9 spiritual types of an Enneagram. It starts with an E, A-N-N-E-A. Don't trust me, I can't spell, G-R-A-M. And there are 9 spiritual types. 6s, for example, so you have a certain personality trait, and then there's the good side and the bad side, or what you're like when things are going well and you're healthy, and when things are not. And so 6s, which, for example, when 6s are stuck, they believe the world is a dangerous place, and that's the lens they have. When they're free, they display tremendous courage. So if you're a 6 and you read this, you might recognize when you have had great courage and when you have been fearful of this scary world. 2s, for example, are known as helpers. When free, they are sympathetic and warm-hearted, and when stuck, they feel a deep sense of being unlovable. The 5, on the other hand, is known as the investigator. At their best, they are insightful, curious, and alert. When they are stuck, they have deep insecurities. So now you're all curious what you are, aren't you? And I was told, it was kind of interesting, that this was developed a long, long time ago among a monastery in Europe to make sure that you had all 9 of those types represented in a community because each brought something unique and important. You didn't want all of one type. So what they did is they determined people's types and then separated them based on those types. As you might imagine, that might be helpful, especially with people like me. So I was told that I had a personality trait of an Enneagram number 8, the challenger. Being an 8 meant that I shared my spiritual type with Hitler. All right, if you don't like that, how about Keith Richards? Fidel Castro. So this is the first thing I read, and I'm like, perhaps I'm not suited for ministry. So I read further, and Gandhi was on the list, so I'm okay with Gandhi. I'm good with Gandhi. Like, maybe we should put Gandhi at the top of the list so that we're still in. But I think really Gandhi should be at the bottom of the list for people like me. You know, pay attention. So 8s at their worst are bullies. And at their best, they have tremendous energy to serve as advocates for justice. I want to be an advocate for justice. And no one in my life was surprised about this but me. And it scared me, to be a little honest. This knowledge makes me want to be very careful about what I worship. What became abundantly clear to me was that what you're working on influences me, and what I'm working on influences you. The Enneagrams showed me the personal power we have, and how these characteristics weren't inherently good or bad, but could result in either. Again, we should be careful what we worship, because each of us has power. I'm thinking maybe the reason our denomination has survived is actually because it's adapted, I think, because people recognized their strengths, be it peace, which is what my husband is. He gets the good one. Be it peace, love, or I get the good one. Be it peace, love, or power, and use it in the best way possible. When we leave our self-interest aside, we can worship something outside ourselves, at least some of the time. We can offer our families, our church, our world, our very best. This can mean maintaining covenant in meetings, that is, believing in best intentions. It can mean listening, really listening, even when you're frustrated. I have spent hours in the last month or two at the Iowa Historical Society researching Unitarian Universalism here in this state. And it seems to me we don't throw a single piece of record away. There is in there a fantastically boring details. Bless those long-gone people who made a difference because of their organizational skills. Bless those that kept the records. Bless those that kept the accounts and the minutes. Without that kind of work, the management of our community, our church, is not possible. Bless those leaders that persevered even in the face of intense criticism. I admire those people who serve as the glue, who hold our institution together. Who is that here? I know it's not very common to say, but bless our administrators, past and present. Like Emerson's contemporary, Reverend Henry Whitney Bellows, who helped us adapt, evolve, and survive. Many do this, like Bellows, with intense criticism. Unlike Emerson, Bellows saw the need for institutions. He wrote that in accordance with the whole providence, every radically important relationship of humanity is and must be embodied in an external institution. Institutions are the only constant and adequate teachers of the masses. He also believed that some divine blessings are inherently social, that the Holy Script communicates with humanity and not private persons. What do you make of that? I'm not sure it sits too easy with me either. Still, there's something adaptive that we've held onto from his words, and it works. What did he worship? Put in more contemporary terms, might we say that he worshiped finding meaning together, that we might be richer for our being together. I see glimpses then of the beloved community in his work. He organized a conference that included not only ministers, but for the first time, lay leaders as delegates outside of Boston, serving to unite Unitarian congregations and serve as a means of coordinating communication for the movement. He was a fundraiser for both Meadville Seminary and Antioch College, and he helped found the Sanitary Commission during the Civil War, which immobilized thousands to improve conditions in the field, food safety, and treated soldiers from both the North and the South. The Red Cross, when it was formed, was modeled after the Sanitary Commission. And it was because of these travels and these good works that he was able to serve the Unitarian movement, because he knew everybody. He was centralized in one person. The UUA writes of Bellows as a great institutionalist. They offer that it was difficult to imagine this movement's survival without the continuing fruits of his creative work. Perhaps we would not be meeting today but for his efforts. Love stays. Yet he has been underappreciated. His transcendentalist opponents broadcast in many published writings their rejection of both his theology and his churchmanship, and they were far better writers than he. Their estimate of him misrepresented both his thought and his aims. But this is enough history for one morning. Like Emerson and Bellows, like those countless recorders of minutes and accounts, we are in our time and we are adapting. We are using, whether we are conscious of it or not, the fertile or barren soil of the past. We live in this thin film between the past and the future. It is the only place we ever really are. Imperfect in our expression of love, us often worshiping what may not be ideal. I'll repeat again these words. Life's gift to you, your loves, will stay always in one form or another. Maybe not recognizable to you, but endure they will in the relationships that follow, in your children, in institutions, in your unique words echoing long after you are gone. Your loves will stay. In return, I ask you about your gift to life. Carefully choose what you love, for it will be what you worship. Regardless if you worship for good or ill, you will change the world. Amen.